Hi, welcome to another video. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I started my DIY investing journey in the fall of 2021, in October of 2021, when I opened up the account I often share with you all here on Questrade. And in this video today, I'll share with you the rookie mistakes I have made over the last 2 to 3 years that have cost me over $10,000. My hope is that by sharing my unfortunate experience and poor choices and actions, I'll at least save one other investor out there from making the same mistakes. Now, for a bit of context, recall how I said I started investing in the fall of 2021? At that time, the markets were very high because there was a lot of stimulus money in the markets coming from all that spending to fight COVID from 2020 and so on. And so together with all this money in the market, inflation was going up. By early 2022, governments all around the world had started fighting inflation. But in the fall of 2021, when I started investing, markets were very high and exuberant. In order to fight inflation, governments started to raise interest rates. Stock markets came down. And now remember that I was new to the market. I'd started investing in the fall, in October. Even if I started investing in October, by early 2022, I felt comfortable and confident enough to start investing in individual stocks. Oh, by the way, when I first started investing in 2021, I started by investing in ETFs, as is often recommended. If you're new to the market, invest in index funds and ETFs in order to minimize market volatility risks. But by early 2022, I felt comfortable and confident enough to start investing in individual stocks. Now, please note that most of the numbers we're going to look at in this video are related to capital appreciation and loss on disposal of stocks, as opposed to dividend income, because I know that most of my videos tend to be focused on dividend income. So keep that in mind as we look at the numbers. So again, to emphasize the fact that you should keep in mind that I only started investing in the fall of 2021, and the markets that I was operating in 2022 turned out to be one of the worst in history. It was a bear market and the stock market lost about 20%. In fact, 2022 was one of the worst markets since the housing bubble of 2008. And for clarification, we'll look at two sets of spreadsheets. The one will just show the transactions. Then we will look at a consolidated spreadsheet that systematically goes through the purchase disposal of every individual stocks. So keep that in mind. Now, before we look at the numbers, if you're new to investing, it's important to remember that investing is long-term in nature, and over the long term, the stock market always goes up. The other thing to keep in mind is that oftentimes, if you see red on your screens or your stocks are down, you're not losing money. You only lose money when you sell, when you're in the red. Because when you sell and your stocks have dropped below your purchase price, then you've locked in a loss. The third item to keep in mind is that in order to minimize the risk of being negatively influenced by volatility in the market, you should try and keep away from the market once you start investing. Simply automate your contributions into your account, and that way you'll not be forced to look at your portfolio on a regular basis as contributions go in automatically. So, having said all that, let's look at the stocks that cost me over $10,000 in rookie mistakes. So this is my activity summary that I typically download from my brokerage account on Questrade. Usually the action that I'm sharing is dividends. Today, buys and sells. So the first stock we will look at is AbbVie, ticker symbol ABBV. Now, in February of 2022, I bought 14 shares of AbbVie at an average price of $141.77, and I held on to them for a bit. Now, something to note is that my original thesis for most of my stocks remains unchanged. I know that AbbVie is a great dividend stock, and I am a dividend investor. So when I bought AbbVie, it was because I was looking for a blue chip stock for dividend income. So I bought AbbVie in February of 2022, and then I turned around and sold it in August of 2024 at an average price of $143.39. The main reason I sold it is because after I bought AbbVie, I held on to it for those 6 months. The stock price declined significantly, and then it gradually started to recover. And so once it recovered and passed the entry point at which I entered the position, I decided, it's time to sell out of the position because for 6 months it was lightly underwater. The unfortunate thing today is that AbbVie share trades at about $206 at the time of this recording. So think of me divesting myself of this stock at less than $144 in 2022. That's why investing is supposed to be long-term in nature. The second stock is Altria, ticker symbol MO. So as the market started to recover in the middle of 2023, I bought 54 shares of Altria because it's a great dividend payer. It's also quality stock, to be honest. Now, I know it's a sin stock, please don't judge me. And so I bought 54 shares at an average price of $45.44. Unfortunately, shortly after I bought MO, it started to decline in price because of troubles with the stock as a whole, the performance, the fact that there's ongoing decline in the demand for smokes and so on. And so the share started to decline for months on end. And so I held on to it for a while and I turned around about 8 months later. By early 2024, you can see there in April of 2024, the stock price was still below where I entered. It started to recover from about $39. It was up to $42.12. I decided, okay, I'll cut my losses. I'll only lose about $3 a share, but those are 54 shares, right? And so I sold out of the position at $42.12. I ended up locking in a loss on sale of about $180. So that is Altria. So the third stock is an ETF, VTI. VTI is Vanguard's total stock market ETF. And so it tracks every publicly listed stock in the US market. Right from the get-go in the fall of 2021, when I started investing, I wanted VTI to be the foundational ETF of my portfolio. So as you can see here, I invested aggressively, even if it was expensive. The average price for my 30 shares was $235 a piece. And so that was a lot of money for me, but I invested aggressively because I was looking to have a strong foundation. And so as I held on to this stock and 2022 happened, I was so discouraged because the price could not recover throughout most of 2022. Now, remember my entry price was $235. And so because I held on to these stocks for a long time and the price wasn't recovering, you'll see here that by June of 2023 and July, it had not yet recovered. The stock price had not yet recovered to $235. In fact, I ended up selling out of this position at an average price of $219, all the 30 stocks in two different sales. I sold the first 10 in June of 2023 at $212 because throughout 2022 and early 2023, it declined and the stock price was as low as $187, $188. And so once it crossed 210, I thought I need to get out of this position. In July of 2023, I sold the remaining 20 for $226 a piece, locking in a loss by selling at an average price of $219 after buying at $235 a piece. And so I locked in a loss on sale of about $482. The next stock is VYM. I knew that VYM was a strong and great dividend ETF. This is Vanguard's high dividend yield ETF. I started by buying 10 shares in February in early 2022 at an average price of $111.50. And it only kept on declining in price. And so I was waiting. It declined so much, it dropped to 101 and lower. And I thought, I'll never recover from this. Rookie mistake. And so once it started to recover and it crossed 105, 107, I thought, okay, I'll take my loss. Again, like the mistake I made with the others, by the summer of 2023, it had not yet recovered to the original purchase price. So I figured I'll take a small loss and I'll sell out of the position. So in July of 2023, I sold all 10 shares at about 107 per share. And so I locked in that loss as well. It's not for lack of knowing, but a rookie mistake. So VYM, selling out of VYM cost me some loss there, both at sale and capital appreciation had I held on to the stock, because today VYM trades at about $138 a share. So that's VYM. So the next stock is XEI. Now, the very first investment I ever made in my portfolio was to buy 3 shares of XEI. So I love this stock. And my thesis for it still holds. It's still a great ETF. It's a BlackRock high dividend ETF and tracks 75 of the best dividend pairs in the Canadian market. So it's still a quality dividend ETF. I kept on building until I reached 52 shares. However, because of the decline in the market, again, same story largely, I felt like the stock price was not appreciating. If you'll see here, by July of 2023, the stock price was a little lower. Against better judgment, I went out and sold all my XEI stocks as well. And so the other thing I want to mention is that as you see me buying some large positions, note that in some cases, I'm selling out of one position and reallocating that funding to a different stock. I do not always have money to put in the larger positions you see. So don't assume that I have a lot of money to put in stocks. So I ended up selling all 52 shares at an average price of $24.33, which is below my purchase price of $24.91. So that's XEI. So the next stock is CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, ticker symbol CM. Now, when I first started investing, the stock price for CIBC was very expensive. However, in May of 2022, the bank had a stock split, and so I felt that it became more affordable for me. So in the spring of 2023, I started a position in CIBC and bought 30 shares at an average price of $57.83. Shortly after I started investing in CIBC, the stock price started to decline further. Now, remember, I was coming from all the stock lows throughout 2022, so I was wary of staying in a stock that had a declining price for any extended period of time. So I held on to CIBC for just a short time, about 3 or 4 months, and the stock price stopped to grow. It would decline from between 51 to about 58. And so 3 months in, unfortunately, restless, I sold out of the position. Today, the share price of CIBC is about $102 per share. So again, not being able to hold for the long term was a very costly mistake. And I think I made a gain of about $1.50 or something like that. So another big mistake, another rookie mistake. Now, last but not least, another stock that contributed to my $10,000 loss is another of Canada's Big Five, Bank of Nova Scotia, ticker symbol BNS. Again, I bought this and started this position in early 2022. When the markets had started falling, I saw a buying opportunity, and it is a great dividend pair. So I held onto it for months, almost 10 months. But remember that throughout 2022, stock prices kept on declining. Bank of Nova Scotia was no exception. And so by the end of 2022, prices came down significantly. Turns out when I first entered the position at about 92.63, that was about the height of the price of this stock. In fact, to date, the stock has never recovered to this high. And so no surprises when later in 2022, I realized that the stock was less than $70 and had been at a very low price throughout most of 2022. So in November, I sold out of the position altogether and figured I'll reposition the amount of money to a different stock. Again, like I said, to date, the stock price has not recovered to over $90. So that's Bank of Nova Scotia. Now, to be clear, I have re-entered some of the positions. I bought AbbVie again, and I bought VTI again. If you've watched my recent videos, you'll see that I have AbbVie, I have VTI, and I believe I have other stocks. Now, before we look at the aggregate spreadsheet, if you enjoy content like this, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It helps the channel grow. It also encourages me to continue making these videos. Don't forget to share with family and friends and hit on the bell icon so that you're notified every time I post a new video. I appreciate that very much. Let's look at more numbers. So this is the aggregate summary of all 7 stocks and how I ended up with a loss of $10,000. So stocks, and then the tickers, and then the number of shares, the price at which I purchased or entered each position, the sell price for each stock, the gain or loss on disposal, on sale of the stocks, and then the current price in the market today at the time of this recording, and then the difference in price between the sale price and where I would be had I not sold. So what I lost in capital appreciation, and then the capital loss resulting from selling too soon. And then of course, the total loss because I had losses both at sale. Right here, I had losses both at sale, and I also had capital appreciation or capital loss from selling too soon. So the total loss from getting out of these positions, understanding that I have re-entered some of these positions at a much higher price. For instance, I re-entered VTI and my average price for VTI is about 280 or greater per share. And then the currency, again, if you've watched any of my videos, you know, I like Questrade because I can hold my stocks and receive dividends in the respective currencies for my stocks. So my US listed stocks, I hold in US dollars, and my Canadian listed stocks, I hold in Canadian dollars. And as always, I convert all my dividends or all my numbers into Canadian dollars. So we're working with a single currency for reasonability. So AbbVie, I bought 14 shares of AbbVie at $141.77 and sold at $143.39 and made a small gain of $1.62. Today, AbbVie share price is over $206, at least at the time of this recording. That's a price difference of almost $63. Had I not sold at $143, I'd be up almost $63 a piece on my 14 shares. Now, when I re-entered AbbVie, and I do have AbbVie in my portfolio right now, and I have 30 shares, I believe, I bought the stock in the fall of 2024 at an average price of $171. That's the cost of hopping in and out of the market. So capital loss from selling at $143 is about $877. In total, I lost $875 because I have a little gain here. And I lost about $875. That's equivalent to about $1,200 Canadian. Altria Group, ticker symbol MO, 54 shares. I bought at $45.45. I sold at $42.12. I made a loss on sale of about $180. Today, Altria shares trade at about $65.50 at the time of this recording. Had I not sold at $42.12, I would be up at least $23.38 based on the sale price of the stock today. And so capital loss for selling at $42 is $1,262. And the total loss, given this loss on sale of $180, is about $1,442. That's almost 1,776 Canadian dollars. VTI, Vanguard's Total Stock Market ETF, I initially bought 30 shares at $235.28, and then I sold out of the position at a loss at $219.22, locking in a loss of $481.80. Today, VTI shares trade at about $318 a share, which means that by selling at $219, I locked in a loss per share of over $98. So my capital loss for selling at $219 is $2,953, and collectively, including the loss on sale, is $3,435, and that's equivalent to $4,706 Canadian. I currently have about 25 shares of VTI. I re-entered the position in the spring, I think, of 2024, and my average cost per share for VTI is currently about $280. That's a shame. Rookie mistake, cost me so much. VYM, 10 shares, I bought at $111.50 and sold out at $107. So I locked in a loss of about $44. The current share price for VYM, the current share price is about $138. And so by selling at $107, I locked in a loss of $30 per share for a total capital loss of about $305. Because I also lost on sale, I lost in total about $349 US. That's equivalent to about $477 Canadian based on current rates. XEI, 52 shares. I bought at $24.91, sold at a loss, $24.33. locked in a loss of $30.16. Today, XCI shares are at about $29.50, which means that if I had not sold at $24.33, I'd be up about $5.15. So capital loss from selling too soon, $268. And because I also lost on sale, my total loss is about $298. CIBC, ticker symbol CM. I initially bought 30 shares at $57.83. And then I sold out at $58.03. I made a small gain of $6. Woohoo! Today, CIBC shares trade at about $102 a share, which means that by selling at $58.03, I missed out on capital appreciation of almost $44 per share. And so by selling at $58, I locked in a capital loss of $1,319 because had I held on to CIBC, which is a great stock, and I'm thinking of re-entering the position, I would be up at least $1,319 in terms of capital appreciation alone. But because I made a little gain there, my net loss on selling CIBC too soon, my net loss is $1,313. And then Bank of Nova Scotia, 23 shares. I bought at $92.63 and then I sold out at $69.20. I'm embarrassed to say so. I locked in a loss of $539. And today, Bank of Nova Scotia shares trade at $78. So you can see that it has never recovered to the $93 I paid for it in 2022. By selling at $69.20 though, given today's share price, I locked in a loss of $8.81 per share, because had I held on to today, I'd be up at least $203. Given the loss I took at sale as well, collectively, my total loss on Bank of Nova Scotia is $741.52. So in total, I lost $10,710.46 by making rookie mistakes and selling out of these 6 stocks way too soon just because the market was blinking red or share prices were not appreciating as fast as I expected that they would. So that is my tale of war. Hopefully my mistakes helps you to consider holding onto your stocks for a really long time. I think that the longer you hold on to your stocks, the better your chances of benefiting both from capital appreciation, increases in dividends, and of course, the continuing dividend income. The least I should have done is held on to the stocks and continued collecting dividends. But that's water under the bridge, and so hopefully somebody's learned from my mistakes. Now, before you judge me, remember all investors make mistakes. Now, this has been my Waterloo, but also other seasoned investors make mistakes. If you've listened to Warren Buffett during his annual, addresses to shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway or the letters that he sends out each year, he often admits to costing shareholders in Berkshire Hathaway a lot of money by failing to take advantage of opportunities in the market when they presented themselves. So that is his kind of mistake. Mine was buying, not holding long enough, or panicking and selling too soon. But Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all times, also has his own mistakes. Then there are other seasoned investors like Bill Ackman. I don't know if you might know this. I've known this and I followed him for a while. Around 2015 to 2017, he invested in a pharmaceutical company and ended up making a huge loss of about $3 to $4 billion. It almost resulted in the collapse of his company. Pershing Square Capitals, I think, is the name of Bill Ackman's investment company. And so that was a big mistake, and he acknowledges it. So while my mistakes may seem very high, and yes, it is a lot of money, $10,000, remember some of it is just based on potential capital appreciation. In real life, I also lost money. Remember that all investors make mistakes. It's just that many will not own up to it, like I've decided to face up. But I'm a small investor, and I'm happy to share my experience in the hopes of saving other investors from making the same mistake. Many of us will make mistakes. For as long as you learn from it and improve your investing skills, and I think I'm better for the mistakes I made because I do not sell out of my positions easily these days. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.